Welcome back to Shat on TV Watchmen, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series Watchmen. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Roger Roper.
Did I start all this?
And this is our Instacast edition, where we look back on this week's episode of Watchmen and provide our immediate thoughts right after watching the episode. Raj, this is the penultimate episode of season 1 of Watchmen. Could be the penultimate episode of all of Watchmen ever. It was titled A God Walks Into a Bar. This is episode 8. Roger Roper, what'd you think?
You know, I packed up my suitcase and my little overnight bag and my computer and my microphone and my earphones because I knew I'd be recording the podcast over at my girlfriend Kelly's house. Because as the season has gone on, we've been watching and following the episodes together. And so when the season or when the episode ended, I looked at her and I said, well, what'd you think? She said, listen, I thought this was the best episode of the season. I looked at Twitter. Most seem to have agreed with her. A few have seemed to disagree, and we can dive into what those are, but I happen to agree with her. I think Dr. Manhattan's an extremely difficult character to write for, and I think that they nailed it, and I'm extremely excited for the finale.
A week ago, I feel myself filled with dread as I watch the weakest episode of Watchmen and estimate the showrunners have made a grievous error that will utterly destroy a critical character in the Watchmen universe. And 2 minutes from now, you're telling me the words that make me feel it's okay to be wrong about a show when it utterly redeems itself with an episode that shifts my revulsion to respect. Raj, episodes like this are why I can't fully embrace a clunker like episode 7. Episode 8 showed the heights that Watchmen could reach as a superior television show. I think I messaged you directly and it was like, that's what I'm fucking talking about.
I think that people who hated episode 7 and thought it was a very divisive one, like yourself and King B, I think are going to really like this one. I think people who maybe liked episode 7 may not like this one so much, but I think more people are going to be thanking Lindelof than tweeting mad emojis at him.
I need to throw myself at the altar of HBO, and I owe an apology to Damon Lindelof and the entire writing staff for doubting their decision to put Dr. Manhattan in a copy of a dead man's body and then have Angela crack his skull with a hammer to get him out because of love. It takes a real storyteller to get you and get me and get the King Bee to recoil from an idea, and then 1 week later, with only an hour of storytelling, get us to embrace it with absolute adoration.
I thought, like you, they were going to put Dr. Manhattan in the dead body, like his powers, like he was going to go into the, you know, like those old cartoons where a ghost would go into the body and then they would inhabit it and then they would go from body to body. But they don't do that. They just pick and choose one, and he looks at it and he copies their likeness so that he can be them. They already have documentation. You know, he can really truly become someone. I like that. And I also like the idea that it was Ozymandias who created that disc. It makes sense to me that that was his plan A, that he would capture and make Dr. Manhattan forget who he was. And that's why, again, whether people think it's too convenient or they think it's good storytelling, it makes sense of why his memories were gone for 10 years. So again, this is fine to me.
I'm so glad Jeremy Irons was allowed to play this role. When Dr. Manhattan goes into that polar fortress and we see Jeremy Irons, I felt like that was still Adrian Veidt from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He'd just been sitting there this whole time. It was amazing the way they made that continuity. I felt so at home there. And it's a great opportunity for people who were never acquainted with Ozymandias as a character, Adrian Veidt as a character, to see that he's not just some crazy guy eating cake on a moon. He's actually a genius and very clever with a fantastic sense of humor.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I've got Kelly out there watching the movie. Fans of the comic book will probably, well, listen, small steps, right? I can't get her to read an entire comic book. The fastest way I can get her to caught up and fill in and make sure that she knows the true character of Adrian Veidt. Because I think without that context, like you said, people just kind of assumed that he was just this crazy guy who's living on some moon somewhere near Jupiter. But there is more of a rich, layered performance. And again, I think we're going to get into it as we start talking about some of the big things that we saw here in the Instacast. But Yeah, if you didn't have that context, you would have thought he was just a crazy guy. And Jeremy Irons really does, like you say, transport us back to the first time that we read the comic book. We know who this character is, and it is like seeing an old friend or maybe a colleague of sorts.
I almost forgot, we should tell people, in case they shut off the episode immediately, that there was a post-credit scene with Adrian Veidt, with Ozymandias. That's very, very important to watch. So if you watch the episode and decided to do something else, or you went to bed and you're listening to this podcast in the morning, you got to watch that scene before you listen to the deep dive, because I guarantee we'll be discussing it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was more than a stinger. It really was. It was like an entire 5 to 6 minute scene, and it tells a good story, and there's some good callbacks there. But people who've never, maybe God forbid that this is your first time ever listening to us, what exactly is the Instacast, and what are we going to be doing all week?
So we do break up our Watchmen content rather than doing one big long episode. We do an Instacast, which comes out immediately after we watch the show. This is just our immediate thoughts, and it gives us another 24 hours to prepare the deep dive for you. So that'll give us time to kind of research what it is that we want to talk about that we're presenting here. And then we'll come back with a deeper dive that's usually about an hour long, where it can really bring in all the literary references, get a feeling on the pulse of what the viewers are thinking, and have some more time to digest it. And then, provided we get enough mail, we'll also do a newsstand edition later in the week where we read listener mail as well. So that's how the show works. Again, this is the Instacast right now. But for the deep dive, Raj, with 24 hours to go until we actually record it, what is it that you think you'll be talking about?
I really like the biblical allegories that were all over the episode. You see a young John being handed his first Bible, which, again, as I was watching the movie with Kelly before you got back from the Arsenal party, I confirmed that there is a scene, and this is actually also in the comic book, when he's making love to Janie for the first time, his watch is sitting atop a Holy Bible. And it looks exactly like that Holy Bible that he's handed by the caretakers that are taking care of him and his father as they're escaping to the United States. And so when you see that, and then there's this whole plot device of him creating Europa, like we suspected that he was behind it. That was confirmed this episode. Crookshanks and Phillips are not. We thought maybe Mr. Phillips was the embodiment or the copy of Dr. Manhattan, when in fact that's just Adam and Eve modeled after those caretakers. And we thought that maybe this was a prison. Maybe Dr. Manhattan was working on behalf of Lady Trieu. And it turns out that was just Dr. Manhattan kind of spreading and figuring out what else he could do. And what I really thought was the story that, or kind of the aha moment for me in this episode, is Ozymandias' story is really the Black Freighter story of this series. We thought, or we made the assumption, that American Horror Story would be the story within the story, and that would be the Black Freighter. But when you think of all the little clues that happen throughout the series, with the pirate flag and the fact that he's reading the book Fog Dancing, which also is the novel that was written by the same author that wrote the Black Freighter, and that also happens to be the only fictional book in the comic book or in the universe. Those are all the telltale signs that he is the Black Freighter. This is his side story that's an overall allegory, and that allegory being what we think is Eden, what we think we want is paradise, ultimately ends up being our prison. Like, what would happen if I was a god? Like, people would want to trap me. They would never want me to go. And this is something that mankind has struggled with throughout our existence. In fact, they point this out in the when they're at the bar, and Angela says to him, "Oh, what is this? Your Zeus thing? You coming down? You hanging in? You blended down with us on Earth?" Gods were created as a way for us to explain our humanity and keep us all in line. But what would happen if you could actually interact with a god? You'd never want them to leave, or you'd want them on your side, which the original story talks about. So I like how Ozzy thinks that he's trapped, that he is that absentee god. No one knows about him. He's not getting the recognition, and then he's offered it, and it turns out to be a prison. So again, beautiful storytelling. Really excited on how they're going to wrap this up. I'm a little worried. There's some odds and ends that people have pointed out to me, and I want to get your opinion of it. But that's my big overarching plot that I really want to dive into on the deep dive.
I saw all those things as well with the Adrian Veidt character, so I'm glad you're going to be going into those. In particular, his interaction with the people of Europa is really fascinating to me. Ozymandias, he always felt that he had to take care of his children, his 8 billion children on Earth, as he says in this episode, that he was a superior being and he wanted to elevate them into that level. So all these projects that he always had were these like social improvement projects and this idea of driving toward a sort of an Ubermensch. And it was always failing. And so you see him kind of in 2009 just having to go through the motions of dropping, baby squids on people, which, by the way, we should mention that he's doing it actively, right?
That's right. He's the one trying to keep his plan in line. He's frustrated with them just like a god would be. He's like, listen, I gave them paradise and they keep fucking making bombs. Like, I can't stop them. What the fuck?
Now, the irony is that Dr. Manhattan sends him to this pure place with people who are programmed basically to just take care of each other and serve the greater good and all that stuff. And he, because he is a human, corrupts everything around him. It's fucking great.
Agreed. It's great. It's hilarious. I love it.
Now, the topic I really want to cover in the deep dive is chaos as a plot twist, right? So just last week, I was watching episode 7 and I was lamenting what felt like these forced twists that were just meant to appease an HBO audience that was more interested in playing an internet guessing game than actually appreciating quality drama. And I started thinking to myself, maybe what happened is all the reasonable twists that a story can take have been used up. So if you want to use a twist now, it's either got to be a regurgitated twist that we've seen before or something that's just laughably outlandish, right? And then we get to episode 8. And in episode 8 of Watchmen, there's this twist on why Judd Crawford died. Is it because Angela, in the future, after Judd Crawford's death, asks through Dr. Manhattan why Will Reeves killed Judd Crawford, and Dr. Manhattan relays that to Will Reeves in the past? Or is she asking because Will Reeves had already done it? Is it chicken or egg? Or is it both at the same time? Is there some sinister agent behind the sabotage? Or is it just chaos? Is it just one of those things that just happen and there's no insertion point for the idea? The idea just is. I really hope it's the latter, because that chaos concept is one of the beautiful paradoxes of time. If you could communicate back and forth between time, then this inevitably will occur.
Yeah, Gene, I'm glad you brought that up, because if there's anything that people are complaining about this episode, it's this perceived time travel or closed time loop, where they're comparing it to Lost or the Three-Eyed Raven a la Hodor in Game of Thrones. And I think that what they fail to understand is that's literally Dr. Manhattan's character. The way he perceives time is different than the way that you and I perceive time. He is experiencing everything, the past, the present, and the future all at once. So when he's having conversations with Hooded Justice a few years in what we perceive as the past, he's having them at the same time or simultaneously with Angela. And I think that, again, I'm pleased that hopefully this solves the question of whether or not Judd was a good guy or a bad guy. Hopefully it proves that Judd is the good guy and it was just his wife that was the bad guy. But, what's your opinion that people are thinking that they're Marvel incoming this episode or the series?
I think you're spot on with that. There's a power and a tragedy and a helplessness to Dr. Manhattan. So the power obviously being that he can see all of this, and he does have some pretty sweet blue glowy power. We can make people's heads blow up and shit like that. On the other hand, there's a tragedy to it in the sense that he will always be in that intrinsic field chamber. He is always being ripped apart and feeling that dread forever. And there's a helplessness too, where he said before, for Dr. Manhattan, it's like being able to see the strings, but the puppetry is still there, meaning he can't change it. He can only see it differently than we do.
I think as we start to get some emails coming in for the newscast, again, write in hosts@shatontv.com. I think people are going to be torn over the Dr. Manhattan portrayal, because we were used to Billy Crudup's version in the Zack Snyder film, which I thought was wonderful. I think Billy Crudup kind of nailed that monotone, that kind of distance portrayal of Dr. Manhattan. As the episode went on, I did like more of this version, but I wanted to hear your opinion. What did you think of this HBO version of Dr. Manhattan?
The initial voice of Dr. Manhattan on this episode I did not like. And then it seemed to shift to Yahya Abdul-Mateen II's voice, like after he drank the egg. But as Cal, I thought it looked a little goofy, honestly.
Yeah.
With the blue on, it just did it. Something looked off. I didn't like it.
Again, I think it was fine. I did like it. Like I said, as it went on, it kind of grew on me. The thing that I didn't like, that I am agreeing with other people on, is they introduced the idea of transferring Dr. Manhattan's powers into somebody else. Now, people are thinking that he's going to end up transferring his powers to Sister Night. And Sister Night, they're going to do kind of this gender swap where now Sister Night is Dr. Manhattan. And in my opinion, I think they're just introducing this idea because the Senator Keene wants to become Dr. Manhattan. So they have to introduce the idea of how that could possibly happen. If they're not going to recreate it with an intrinsic field generator, then there has to be some sort of device to get Dr. Manhattan into Senator Keene. It still may end up that they transfer it to Angela, because he says, at the end of 10 years tragedy, like, I'll be gone.
It jumped out at me, of course, and they made a really big deal about the whole, theoretical transferring of powers. But I try not to get into what I want to see, because I don't.
That's true.
I said this on Twitter the other day. It's like I don't want to see anything. I want to see a good story. Tell me a good story. I don't want to determine which way it goes.
Right.
But yeah, Raj, it's very Chekhov's gun. I mean, they put it out there.
It's right.
We're probably going to see it happen, or at least an attempt to make it happen.
Right. Some other odds and ends that I really liked about this episode. I like the way that they portrayed VVN, kind of like the 4th of July, how it's become a perverted excuse to dress up and get drunk at bars. Seeing that fat, dude at the bar in blue makeup in celebration of VVN really made me look inwardly at myself and my own personal decisions when I dress up as George Washington and I get all drunk on 4th of July. So I really like that idea. I also like how they've got a world where they've now graffitied, a penis onto Dr. Manhattan, all that kind of stuff. Other things that we learned, that was not Looking Glass in the truck. That was actually the 7th Kavalry coming with their device to trap Dr. Manhattan. We talked about the idea that possibly Judd could be a good guy, just in a wrong place at a wrong time. When Dr. Manhattan goes to Ozzy's bunker, and he says to him, I haven't been on Mars, I've been on Europa. And he says, yeah, a little elephant told me. I wonder if that was a little clue that was Lady Trieu. And then obviously you did talk about the horseshoe. This is coming back in earlier episodes when we're first introduced to Phillips and Crookshanks. They're giving him the horseshoe before the cake. And I wonder if Ozzy learned the plan and discovered it and has been teaching Crookshanks and Phillips to give him the horseshoe in the cake, but they keep getting it wrong. And finally, over 8 years or 7 years, actually, because there's 7 candles on the cake, they finally get it right where they bury it in the cake. And that was either a plan set in motion by Dr. Manhattan, or possibly Veidt is the one that figured it all out and trained them to do that. But again, those are just little odds and ends that I found interesting.
The Lady Trieu thing, I mean, people have noted that the Trieu symbol for her company looks a lot like an elephant head, so that would make sense. I love this idea of Veidt sort of training this impulse to put a horseshoe in the cake.
It's so good.
And then it took so many years, and right when he's hit rock bottom, when everything's going wrong, they finally fucking get it right. They put it in the cake. Yeah. That would be brilliant. And I'm really falling in love with this character. I liked him a lot at the beginning. That feeling kind of waned. Now I'm 100% on board for Adrian Veidt. I just want to see Jeremy Irons go crazy on this. And remember that, you mentioned the Black Freighter, that when the principal character of the Black Freighter does make it home, shit gets really messy really fast.
Exactly.
So if this is Adrian Veidt coming back to Earth for episode 9, we can expect some serious carnage.
Yeah, I'm hoping that he is not already coming, because some people are starting to piece the timeline together, and there would be, if he is celebrating his 7 years, there's still a 3-year gap of him escaping the prison where he is now on Europa and getting back on Earth. I hope he doesn't come back too early, and it all kind of makes sense, but we'll find out. One more episode. I'm excited. Fingers crossed.
All right, same here, Raj. Well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Watchmen Instacast. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. You can email us with your ideas about this Instacast, about the episode at hosts@shatontv.com. The earlier you get those in, the more time we have to digest them. They could find their way into the deep dive. They could find their way into the newsstand. So please go ahead and write in at hosts@shatontv.com or call in with a voicemail at 914-719-SHAT. And remember, this is just the appetizer. The deep dive is coming on Tuesday. So tune in for that.
Yeah. Also, we just in time for Christmas, you can do your shopping on our web store. It's on Teespring. If you search Teespring, search for Shat on Podcast. We'll put the link in the show notes and on our website. But yeah, we've got great designs. We've got designs for Eugene that was designed by a couple of our fans. We've got Roger's Awesome World. We have an Abernathy's Farm shirt back on. So lots of things from coffee mugs to stickers to King Bee Adventure Club tote bags. You can find all that on our Shat the Podcast's store. And I think we're going to put a little discount there for Christmas time. If you order soon this week, I think you can get standard shipping in time for Christmas. So thanks again so much who supported the podcast. People have asked us when we're going to have merch, and we thought this would be a good time to have it. So check it out.
Raj did a beautiful job putting it together. And this guy, from other stuff that we've done before, like with the American Outlaws, he knows his merchandise. Like if you want somebody to do your merch, this is the guy to do it.
Thanks, man.
And he did a beautiful job on it. I was going through, even if you're not going to buy anything, just go read the descriptions because they're fantastic. And some of these designs are really, really good. So yeah, do check it out. And again, this is not like a big money grab by us or anything like that. We've been for years, people have been hounding us like, hey, remember when you made those Westworld shirts? They're really cool. Can you make some more stuff? And for years, we're like, no, we're focused on the podcast, doing all this. And finally, we just put in a little extra effort, mostly from Raj, to get it done. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'll be buying some stuff for sure.
The great thing about partnering with Teespring is they do everything on demand. So we don't have to buy a bunch of stuff, do pre-orders, send out all the merchandise on our own. Teespring kind of does it for us. And so then they take a pretty large cut. And like you said, it's not a real big money maker, but we're hoping that people like us enough to wear it out in their daily lives or stick it on their hydro flasks.
It's more a service than commerce, I would say.
That's right.
All right. And as a reminder, we're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review that helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Roger Roper, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Tuesday for our episode 8 deep dive.